Jet Grind Radio!
Jet Grind Radio, the game that led to the game that made me get an Xbox. Up until like 2012, Jet Grind Radio was landlocked onto the Sega Dreamcast. If you don't know, the Sega Dreamcast was an ambitious flop of a system. It had online functionality, it had frickin' memory cards with screens in them, and the discs had CD audio quality supported in games, which was like a dream come true for games like Jet Set Radio with amazing soundtracks. While yeah, none of that sounds particularly impressive now, remember this was 1999 when this came out. Imagine taking home a console right before Y2K destroyed society, being able to browse the web right on your TV. But more than anything, what I will always remember about the Dreamcast, even though I didn't have one as a kid, is the cel-shaded art style that it helped popularize. I'm not an artist, so I can't really describe cel shading, but you know it when you see it. It's why Crazy Taxi looks the way it does, and it's what gives Jet Grind Radio its timeless aesthetic. Now, if you saw my first video, you know Jet Set Radio Future is my favorite game ever. There are a lot of similarities and differences between the two, and I want to make this video pretty much as even-keeled as possible, focusing on Jet Grind Radio by itself, but with the history I have with its successor, it might be a little bit tough for reasons I'll explain in just a bit. Now, I've played and beaten Jet Grind Radio before this video, once on PS3 and once on the Vita. And while the HD re-releases are great and they add a little bit of content that's really cool for fans of Jet Set Radio Future like I am, I just felt like going back to play it on the Dreamcast was the right thing to do. Grabbing the weird controller with the strange wire placed on the bottom and sliding in a virtual memory unit just feels like stepping back in time. Upon booting up the game and hearing the pivotal DJ Professor K scream, "Jet Set Radio!" I feel immediately at home, the bold colors and the up-tempo music pulling me back in. It's strange how years after playing Jet Set Radio Future backward and forward, Jet Grind Radio feels both incredibly familiar, yet entirely different. It's almost like two different timelines, especially because Future is just a retelling of Jet Grind's story, and while it might sound a little bit familiar at first, bear with me. One day, all of your tags in the fictional city of Tokyo-To have been sprayed over by 3 different rival gangs, the Love Shockers, the Noise Tanks, and Poison Jam. Your team of taggers known as the GGs have to set off on a journey to take their territory back by setting out in the fictional world of Tokyo-To, a riff on Tokyo, Japan, and respraying all their graffiti. To do this, you get dropped into an area and have to find all of the red arrows to tag before time runs out. Running up to one of these spots starts a quick time combo event where you have to string analog stick movements together to spray your ink. The more fluidly you do it without breaking the chain, the more points you get. When you finally reclaim your territory, you're ranked on your performance. The health you have left, the time remaining, and how good your combos were determine the rest of your score. If you do well enough, you'll get a Jet ranking for your efforts. Doing so on enough levels will unlock you secret characters. To be quite honest, I don't think I ever got Jet ranking where it mattered. Where the extra challenge comes in is from the police being all over you the moment you arrive. After covering a few tags, the big guns are called in to stop you. On top of that, rival gang members in the area try to steal back your spots unless you scare them off. They will literally take their turf back, and it's really cool, because for a while I had no idea why I was losing points. The first 3 levels set the stage for what the hubs are of larger levels you skate through. Initially, you take off covering a single area and spray paint while you get your bearings. Before long, though, these levels reveal themselves to be linked together through alleyways, railroads, and even underground sewage plants. These levels vary greatly from one another, but each level is linked together by a common color scheme. The dense residential area and construction site are all covered in oranges and reds, where Shibuya Terminal and the surrounding metropolis are accented with yellows and other brightly colored vehicles. Grind City stands out in my mind for its verticality and crossing electrical wires that you can grind on to get to other tagging points. It's really cool. As you reclaim your turf and get your reputation back up, other skaters will approach you and join you at your garage. It can't be that good of a secret hideout if strangers are walking up to your window and asking to join you, but whatever. Each character is important because they each have their own strengths and weaknesses, which fit into one of 3 different categories: power, technique, and graffiti. The issue that I faced during the entire playthrough was that all of the stats are way too vague. The only one I know for sure is that power controls the amount of health you have. I played through the entire game flying very blind, only having a hunch about what each category meant, Since I wasn't going for a perfect score after a while because I knew I was never good enough to anyway, I didn't really put too much thought into the character selection. But maybe if I understood the stats, I could have unlocked a few characters and that would have been kind of fun. Didn't happen though. From what I understand, thanks to this amazing user on Stack Exchange, the graffiti level shows not only how many paint cans you can get, but how many points you get from linking combos. The higher the graffiti, the more points you can get from combos, and also more difficult each combo is, but it also means the higher the bar, the fewer spray cans you get. It's really strange that they wouldn't explain that up front, and honestly, this user made it a little bit easier to understand, but even he was kind of going off of a whim just from playing it. It honestly wasn't that big of an issue. I only stayed away from one character in particular because she just never was able to carry enough spray cans. Besides that, not terrible. I would have just rathered some guidance, maybe just a little bit in the tutorial. Going back and playing the game on original hardware was like a breath of fresh air. Like I said, I've beaten the game on 2 other consoles, one handheld, one not, and playing with the Dreamcast controller feels like the definitive way for me. On the other 2 systems, I felt like I was constantly fighting the analog sticks to get combos down. I don't know if it had to do with stick resistance or what, or maybe some delay, but when I played it this time, I was really playing well. While I never did get jet ranking, I pretty much always got nitro rank right below it. And that's almost the entire game. I felt really accomplished that I did so well after all this time. The analog stick let me rip out perfect combos all over the place, and it was a ton of fun. Even if I had to take quick breaks because that plastic stick really starts to hurt after a while, the nubs are pretty grating on the thumb. I personally hate QuickTime events with a passion, and I always thought of the combos as a negative based off my experience with other systems. But I can honestly say it's a ton of fun, and it really helps separate Jet Grind Radio from its sequel. I'll probably return to this game because of how much fun I had with it on the Dreamcast. It just feels really fluid here. Where the game did get a little polarizing for me was the overall feel of movement, because I grew up with Jet Set Radio Future. In that game, movement feels tighter and quicker. I'm just used to how the characters feel. Compared to that, Jet Grind Radio feels different enough that it feels heavy to control, almost cumbersome. If you grew up with this game, you're probably used to it. It definitely took some time for me to unlearn and get a feel of the game, but once I thought differently about movement, I got a much better feel for it and just had a much better time overall. Just remember, if you played Jet Set Radio Future first, your mileage may vary. Just take a deep breath, put the controller down for a little bit if you need to, and just think differently about it. Consider it an entirely different game. As you eventually defeat rivals in tag battles, you and your crew begin recovering pieces of a broken record called the Devil's Contract. Legend has it that the record was created by an evil sound engineer to summon a demon. That's when all the real plot starts to kick in, and branches away from Jet Set Radio Future's story. This mysterious group called the Golden Rhinos infiltrate the city with their black suits, black cars, and blonde mustaches. They almost look like 70s kingpins. With all the color and vibrancy of Tokyo To, the darkness of these characters really stand out and add a strange eeriness to the world. That and their machine guns. It turns out that the leader of the Rokaku group, Rokaku Goji, plans to take the disc and rule the world using the power of the demon. It's crazy. The GGs end up recovering 2 of the 3 pieces of the disc, but they end up getting robbed and the pieces are stolen, allowing Goji to summon the demon. The sky turns dark gray and you finally face Goji on top of his building dedicated to the record. As you spray graffiti into the tower, a normal defense, you take him out and he falls to his doom. Besides the main story, there's a few bonus levels that allow you to complete challenges to unlock characters. My biggest problem with the game is that you can't go back and do levels you've already accomplished, so if you end up messing up and finishing a level without getting jet ranking, you kind of have to either start the game over or hope you didn't save over your last save, or you're not getting that extra character. It almost makes it a little bit prohibitive to go back and complete the game. But besides that, Jet Grind Radio is a fun return to the era of experimentation. It's a relic of its time when Sega still experimented and tried new things. It's a very vibrant game that feels like a vacation away from the ultra-realistic games of today. The city of Tokyo To feels alive and characters feel distinct, even if the people in cutscenes suffer from Dreamcast mouth syndrome. But Jet Grind Radio and Jet Set Radio prove that a series can still be good if it evolves and changes. With only 2 entries in the series, both games feel distinct from one another and both are worth playing. Are the stories very similar? Yes, but the gameplay is so drastically different that marathoning both games will still be a treat. If Sega never brings back the series again, we can at least say the series went out on top. Well, that's going to do it for the entire Jet Set Radio series. Unfortunately, there's only 2 games, but it's finally come to an end. Even Alexander wept because he had no more worlds to conquer. So now we must weep too.